Hello all, welcome to the channel. I thought I would provide some commentary on this EVA foam install because it's pretty complex. You'll notice I'm using poster board to make templates. I just use little pieces to push up against the sides because there are no straight edges on these boats. It's pretty annoying. So I just push those against and then I tape it together. And that's how I can get a real exact fit. And then I'm taking that template and transferring them over to the EVA foam. A note of caution, don't do what I did. Make sure that when the EVA foam arrives that you unroll them immediately. Stick them under a carpet in the house or something upside down so they unroll. They're much easier to work with once they're flattened out. My sheets came in 3x8, so I had to tape them together so that they'd span the width of the boat. You want to be very careful when you're cutting them to fit together that they line up properly. If you're using this kind of fake teak look, you'll want to leave a full gap of white on one end and then cut that gap off on the other end to butt them together so that the fake teak wood looks consistent all the way across. And then once you have that, you can do what I did. I initially taped them together to get the full measurement across because my boat is it's at its widest around 5 feet wide. So I had to get about 6 feet out of the two butted together. And then once you have those taped together, you can then kind of find a center using those teak lines. Some people might want to use one line right down the middle. You might want to split the difference and have one piece of teak down the middle. Inevitably, in my case, I knew it wouldn't be perfect. I'm kind of a perfectionist. It drove me crazy that when this was all said and done, things didn't line up exactly perfect, but I had to just let it go and do the best I could. You'll notice I'm using something like an old school wallpaper roller and a putty knife to press this into place once I'm happy with where it is. This stuff is very unforgiving, so make sure you move really slow to get it right the first time. As we wrap around here, you'll see that solid gray. Those pieces, if you choose to go solid color, it is kind of a lot easier to work with because you're not using these lines, right? You don't have to deal with these lines being perfectly straight all the way from the rear of the boat to the front of it. And it does take a lot of focus and attention. When I was laying these down, I kind of marked a line. You can't really see it. I wanted to make sure that they lined up in the center line there. Again, that's not technically the center, that's just where one piece begins and the other piece ends, but I had a mark down there so that I knew where, as I was laying this down, where it would be. Then once one was down, I used the other one to make sure I had the line. Here you'll see me just rolling this out. This stuff is not, it doesn't really let you make a mistake. Mine had adhesive backing on it. It was recommended to use like a 3M spray. I think I used 3M 77 and then went to like a 3M 90. And so here you'll see I slowed the video down a bit here to cut this out so you can kind of see what I'm doing. You're probably wondering why in the video I don't cut out any of the hatches. That's because I wanted to give it some time to just settle in before I started making all kinds of cuts on it and giving it a chance to kind of curl up on the ends, because I was noticing that it will do that. You have to keep pressing it down or setting stuff on it, even with the adhesive spray. So I wanted to sit for about 2 or 3 days with some weight on it before I went and cut all the hatches out. Here I'm just doing my best to line everything up. You'll see that this doesn't quite cover the entire side of the boat here, that side hatch. And that's kind of frustrating. That's 8 feet. That's where the 8 feet runs out. I wanted to keep one piece so that the teak wood would look consistent all the way from front to back as far as I could. And so you'll notice at the end here, I'm having to add like maybe about 4 inches to finish this up here. The reason I started with the floor and then worked up was because the pieces on the top, I decided to actually overlap them over the side pieces there, so they come out just enough to cover that, and then the side walls cover the edges of the floor to give it a really clean look. I try to spray only half of the deck so I'm not stepping on spray adhesive when I'm working my way up the front of the deck here. This piece ends up coming up short because technically it's the same piece I used for the flooring. Without going into detail, I can't explain why the flooring wasn't quite wide enough, so I had to use a separate sheet for this part. So this comes up short. Now in a future video you'll see that the trolling motor mount will cover this part right at the end here. And I have been told, and I found it to be correct, that you don't want to kind of mix and match these things. You want to make sure they're all going in the same direction whenever possible. If you can figure out what design they roll them in the direction, you want to keep them in that, because when the sun hits it, you'll notice in some of these videos, these transition pieces, there's a little difference in the complexion and the color than the way the sun hits them. You can't really notice it now. But these pieces, all the pieces in so far, all match up, so that's why they're pretty consistent. But this one that I'm about to add, you'll notice is a little different. Now, fortunately, this is going to get covered up. The reason I use 3 pieces here, I'm running out of space here, and I didn't want to purchase more of it. It can be quite expensive, so it ended up looking pretty good. But you'll notice that little shade difference there in those pieces. And these are then the final 2 pieces that I had to put in, because again, the 8 feet didn't quite cover this. This drove me crazy, but nonetheless, it works fine. You can't really notice it unless you're like me and you're really picky. And here's the finished product. All the flooring is in. And I'll leave it sit, like I said, for about 2-3 days, and then I'll cut the hatches out of it, and that'll be in the next video. But let me know if you have any specific questions or if there's anything I didn't cover. You do want to make sure when you're doing this you use one of those like breakaway knives. You almost want to break and use a new razor every single cut that you make. It's very important. Thank you for watching.